I spent my life savings to support my daughter's dreams, but she sided with her cheating mom for a flashier life and called me a failure. A year later, she came back begging for a second chance after getting played. But I just laughed and told her exactly what she deserved to hear. I put my life savings on the line to help my daughter achieve her dream. But when my marriage fell apart, she sided with her cheating mother. Her mom's new man, who promised a lavish lifestyle, had swayed her. She even called me a failure. After a year of silence, my daughter showed up, claiming she'd been played and wanted a second chance. I just laughed in her face. I told her this would happen. 25 years into my happy marriage with Mia, she suddenly announced she wanted a divorce. It hit me like a ton of bricks. There were no warnings. She coldly stated she no longer loved me and found me unattractive. No remorse, just a blank stare. I pleaded with her to tell me if there was someone else, hoping we could work through it, but she just kept saying she hated how I looked, implying I wasn't the man she'd married. Her words cut deep. I couldn't really argue. I knew I'd let myself go. Back in college, I was a star basketball player, super fit, my body a temple. I had plenty of admirers. But that changed after I met Mia. Once we married and had our daughter Jane, things got real. Mia wanted to be a homemaker, so the financial burden fell on me. I worked extra shifts day in and day out for 25 years, never taking a sick day. My sole focus was providing for Mia and Jane, making sure they had everything. Their happiness came first, and somewhere along the way I stopped prioritizing myself. It hurt that my ex was leaving me seemingly just for my appearance. But something felt off. Her sudden desire for a divorce didn't add up. Later that week, I hired a private investigator on a coworker's recommendation. I needed answers Mia wouldn't give willingly. It didn't take long for the PI to confirm my suspicions. Mia was cheating. He provided undeniable photos of her regularly meeting a man named George. I did my own digging and found George on social media. One look and I knew he was wealthy, the kind of money and lifestyle I could never provide. This was the real reason she was leaving. Not my looks, not me letting myself go, but because she'd found someone who could offer her more. Everything I tried so hard to provide for 25 years but couldn't. All my efforts, all my sacrifices suddenly felt meaningless. While the PI gathered more info, I wanted my own proof. One night after Mia fell asleep, I checked her phone. My hands shook as I scrolled, screenshotting graphic, disturbing texts between her and George. She told him how much she hated me, how she wished she'd left sooner but couldn't until she found someone else. I thought I had all the evidence I needed for the divorce. But a week later, the PI sent more photos and shocking news. Jane knew. He showed me pictures of Jane meeting George, looking happy and comfortable. This affair had been going on for a long time. I was floored. Were they planning to keep cheating and only break the news now that they both had everything they wanted? Just before Mia dropped the divorce bombshell, I'd made a massive financial decision, one that, at the time, felt right as a father. Jane, 24, had always dreamed of owning a home. She'd been saving diligently, constantly updating me on her search. A few months before the divorce, she found the perfect house, but it was way out of her budget. She needed a couple $100,000 more. She practically begged for my help, asking for my life savings, money I'd set aside for emergencies and retirement. It wasn't an easy decision, but I loved my daughter more than anything. I couldn't bear the thought of her losing her dream over money. After much thought, I gave her everything I'd saved. I figured sacrifices like this are part of being a parent. My own parents had helped me buy my house and supported us tirelessly when Jane was born, never asking for anything in return. I wanted Jane to be happy, believing this house was the key. When I gave her the money, I told her to use some for renovations, as it was an older property. I didn't want her house rich but cash poor, struggling to fix it up. I also thought the extra cash would be a safety net. I convinced myself it was just money. I could always earn more. I'd be working for the foreseeable future, so I'd rebuild my savings. All that mattered was seeing Jane's dream come true. She was ecstatic, crying in my arms, thanking me. That's why discovering she'd been willingly meeting George and knew about her mother's affair shocked me to my core. After uncovering everything, the affair, the lies, I couldn't stay silent. I confronted Mia and Jane, telling them I knew the whole truth. Mia's immediate reaction wasn't guilt but fury that I'd hired a PI. I wasn't having it. I told her I was the one who had a right to be furious. She'd betrayed me, sleeping with another man. Her outrage just confirmed her lack of respect for me. Then I turned to Jane. She stood there embarrassed, avoiding eye contact. It broke my heart. She was my little girl, the one person I thought I could always rely on. I asked her directly why she'd been meeting George. She hesitated, looking between me and her mom, who was silently shaking her head. That only made me more determined. I told Jane how deeply hurt I was to see her with this man who was destroying my marriage. I urged her to be honest. Finally, Jane broke. She admitted she'd known Uncle George, the man Mia was sleeping with, for a very long time, and that he was a good man. I froze. She knew him well. When had they met? She hesitated again, then revealed her mother introduced them when she was 18. My eyes widened in disbelief. Mia had been having an affair with George for at least 6 years, maybe more. All this time, while I worked myself to the bone for our family, Mia was having a secret relationship right under my nose. The betrayal wasn't recent. It had been festering for years. I felt shock, anger, and heartbreak. My life felt like a lie. I couldn't believe Jane knew for so long and said nothing. The realization that my family, the people I loved most, had kept this secret for years was unbearable. Jane tried to justify her actions, explaining that when she first caught her mom with George, she was furious just like me. But over time things changed. She claimed the more she saw how happy George made Mia, the more she convinced herself that staying silent was best. She said she didn't want to break up our marriage, as if her silence was protecting the family. Mia, on the other hand, showed no remorse. She argued it didn't matter how long the affair had been going on. She was divorcing me anyway. She even tried to justify her deception by saying she only stayed for Jane's sake, claiming that now Jane was an adult, she didn't have to pretend to love me anymore. I scoffed at Mia's attempt to justify herself. I pointed out that Jane turned 18 5 years ago. If Mia only stayed for Jane, she could have left then. Why wait 5 years? The answer was painfully clear. Mia wanted to ensure George would fully commit to her, financially and emotionally, before leaving me. She was hedging her bets, using me for financial support while making sure George was a sure thing. She didn't even argue. She knew I was right. Then I turned to Jane. While the situation was her mother's fault, I blamed her too for being a coward. She could have told me the truth at any point in those 5 years but chose to side with her mother. I accused her of loving her mother more than me, despite Mia clearly not being a good parent. I was the one who worked daily, sacrificed my time, energy, and health to provide for our family for years, while Mia enjoyed comfort and carried on her affair. I reminded Jane that I'd given up my entire life savings for her dream house, yet she hadn't blinked when she took my money, fully aware of the lies and betrayal. Jane started to apologize, her voice shaky, but I was too angry, too hurt to hear it. The weight of the betrayal was suffocating. I couldn't stand being in that house any longer. I walked out, leaving them both, and told Mia to be gone by the time I came back. I didn't want to see her face again. I felt so used. I'd given up my financial security, while she and her mother had clearly just been using me. When I returned home, both Jane and Mia were gone. Fast forward to the divorce finalization. Mia, who'd fought tooth and nail for alimony, lost her case. My evidence, the affair, the lies, was undeniable and worked in my favor. Since Jane was an adult, I wasn't responsible for child support either. I walked away owing Mia nothing, which infuriated her. She was livid, accusing me of leaving her financially insecure, claiming it was her right after she'd given up her life to take care of our home. As for Jane, she stopped talking to me after I confronted her. She clearly sided with her mother during the divorce, making no effort to reach out or apologize. I decided to give her space, thinking she'd come around. However, after the divorce was final, Jane sent me an email that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. She wrote how disappointed she was that I hadn't given her mother anything in the divorce. She called me vindictive, saying Mia had to walk away empty-handed, as if it was my fault for her mother's poor choices. Jane made it clear she was relieved her mother found George, someone who had promised to give them a nicer and more luxurious life. It was surreal reading her words. She sounded like a stranger, no longer the daughter I raised, but someone completely aligned with her mother and George. Jane even wrote that the past few months without me had been stress-free. She enjoyed being around George and went as far as to call me a failure for not giving her and her mother a better life. Jane ended her email by saying she never wanted to speak to me again. I stared at the email, unable to process it. Jane's betrayal stung more than anything Mia had done. My own daughter, someone I had loved, supported, and sacrificed so much for, had completely turned her back on me. She chose her mother's lies and George's money over me. It was as if I'd been erased from her life, as if all those years meant nothing. It took months of therapy to find closure and move on. I cried and fell down many times, but thankfully my friends and family never left my side. After that email, I've been no contact with my daughter and have learned not to miss her anymore. I feel like I've made a lot of progress. That's why yesterday when my daughter showed up at my door out of nowhere, I was genuinely taken aback. She looked a mess, eyes puffy and red from crying. She asked if she could come in to talk. I hesitated. After everything, I wasn't comfortable, but she was still my daughter, and a part of me wanted to hear her out. So I let her in. We sat down and I asked her plainly what she was doing there after all this time. Jane started talking, her voice shaky at first, then admitted I'd been right all along, that she'd been foolish. She called her mother the devil. She explained that after my divorce from Mia, things had gone downhill for her. Mia and George moved in together, planning to marry, but things weren't as rosy as she'd thought. George, it turned out, had kids from previous marriages, and Mia was bending over backwards to win them over. Jane said her mother barely acknowledged her existence anymore. Mia was consumed with pleasing George's kids, doing everything to be accepted by them. Jane described how her mother had emotionally abandoned her, spending no time with her, making it clear where her priorities lay. George's kids, Jane explained, didn't like her. They were unpleasant and made her feel unwelcome. Jane described multiple occasions where George hosted dinner parties, inviting all his kids but conveniently leaving her out. She felt completely rejected by the people she'd once thought would be her new family. When Jane confronted Mia about the favoritism, Mia brushed her off, saying George's kids deserved love and attention because they were still kids, unlike Jane, even scolding Jane for being needy. At this point, Jane was in tears. She confessed she'd used some of the money I'd given her, my life savings, to help her mother whenever she could. Jane had bought gifts for her mother and George's stepkids, hoping to win their approval and stay relevant in her mother's life. But now that the money had dried up, Mia's true colors showed. With nothing left to give, Mia cast her aside like she was nothing. Jane realized Mia didn't truly care about her. She only cared about what she could get from her. Jane told me how for the past year, she'd realized everything I'd told her a year ago was true. Her mother was selfish, manipulative, and only cared about money. Mia had no problem using everyone around her, me, Jane, and now George, for her own gain. Once people outlived their usefulness, she moved on without a second thought. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Jane as she poured her heart out, finally realizing the harsh reality of her choices. She had been a fool, and it had taken her this long to learn that painful lesson. But despite my pity, I knew deep down that things could never go back. The trust between us was shattered beyond repair. When Jane, through tears, asked if I could let go of the past and forgive her so we could start over, something inside me snapped. I laughed in her face out of sheer disbelief. The audacity of it all. After everything she and her mother had put me through. I shook my head, still half amused by her absurd request, and told her the plain truth. There was no forgetting what happened. I couldn't just erase years of betrayal and hurt as if they hadn't existed. I reminded her how she'd kept her mother's affair a secret for years, all while taking my money for her own benefit, pretending everything was fine. That wasn't something I could ever forgive. I told her bluntly that in that respect, she was truly her mother's daughter, manipulative and self-serving. She had inherited that trait from Mia, and I wasn't going to let her walk back into my life now, pretending none of it happened. I made it clear she'd chosen her side during the divorce. When the dust settled, she'd stood by Mia and George, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. I told her flat out that I had no loyalty left for her. I'd spent years sacrificing for her only to have her betray me. That trust was gone and there was no rebuilding it. Jane tried to argue, probably hoping to appeal to whatever paternal instinct was left in me, but I cut her off. She was an adult and needed to solve her own problems. Running to me for help only when things went south with Mia and George wasn't going to work. I had made peace with the fact that she had chosen them over me, and now she would have to live with the consequences. I shut her down quickly and asked her to leave. I didn't want to hear any more about her problems with Mia or George. Frankly, I didn't care. She had made her bed, and now she would have to lie in it. Ever since then, my daughter's words have been circling in my head, and I admit I feel a bit guilty about kicking her out without helping her. Still, I'm relieved the general consensus agrees I'm not at fault for not wanting to help my adult daughter after her betrayal. I'm sure my daughter knew about George's stepkids but was probably always reassured things would work out. However, now that she feels isolated and betrayed, she's turned to me, thinking I might take her in since both her mother and George have basically abandoned her. Well, I have no intention of doing that. She has to learn to live on her own without her mommy or daddy bailing her out. And to everyone asking, no, I'm not going to ask my daughter to return the money I gave her for her house. Yes, it was my life savings, but at the time, I loved her and wanted to do something meaningful for her. That will be the last gift I ever give her, and I don't want the money back. I have a good job, and since my ex-wife isn't with me, I've been able to save quite a bit. It's been almost a month since my last update. My daughter decided to reach out to my parents for help when she couldn't get through to me. My mother called to tell me Jane had complained about her mother and her stepdad, even saying I was heartless for refusing to help and accept her after she showed up crying. What surprised me most was that Jane had never been close to my parents before the divorce. She never liked spending time with her grandparents, but now she suddenly turned to them. My mother asked if she and my dad could do anything for Jane, but I firmly told her not to entertain Jane's calls. I reassured her I'd handle it. After this, I texted Jane and asked her to meet me at a cafe. She immediately agreed. When I met my daughter, I told her she had no right to reach out to my parents behind my back. Jane tried to argue she just missed having a family and felt lonely and miserable. I yelled at her, saying I knew exactly how she felt because I'd experienced the same loneliness when she and her mother left me after the divorce. I reminded her she'd even sent me an email calling me a failure, and then showed up a year later begging for my help. I told her I was sick of her manipulation and that she was testing my patience. Jane tried to argue, but I warned her that if she contacted my parents again, I would get a restraining order. My parents were old and didn't deserve this drama. I made it clear that if she desperately wanted a relationship with us, she needed to start paying me back the money I had given her. Hearing this, Jane argued it was impossible for her to do so and that she could never pay me back. I scoffed and said, "Exactly. You can't. Which is why you need to stay as far away from me and my family as possible." Since my conversation with Jane, I've also sent a voicemail to Mia, informing her about everything. I asked her to talk to our daughter so she stops bothering me and my family. Otherwise, I would have to seek legal help. I'm hoping that after this, Jane leaves us alone. It's been 5 months since my last update, and everyone keeps asking in my DMs, so I want to clarify. Jane has not bothered my family again after I sent the voicemail to Mia. Mia called me back to discuss everything, and was genuinely surprised Jane had come to us for help. My ex denied everything Jane had told me, and instead provided a very different version of events. According to her, Jane was the one having difficulty blending in with the new family, and had been quite rude to the stepkids. Mia said she and George had tried their best, but Jane had refused to accept their family. She also clarified that everyone in the family buys gifts for each other, and Jane had done so once as well, but no one had ever forced her to buy gifts for anyone. Mia was really confused as to why Jane had lied to me about so many things. Honestly, I didn't know who to believe, so I simply told Mia that I just didn't care what happened between them. I wanted Jane to stay out of my life, and that's it. Mia assured me Jane wouldn't ever bother me again, and I guess she kept her word because Jane hasn't been in touch with me or my parents since. Last month, I went on a solo vacation for the first time in my life. I was nervous at first, but then I really enjoyed meeting new people and experiencing a different culture. Life's good, and I have no complaints at the moment.